Welcome the anointed ones. Be careful who you call slow. Some of us are just watching you bury yourself with your own words. Now let me tell you something that will make your haters sweat in the dark. They're not gossiping about your looks, your clothes, or your past anymore. Nope. The new whispers floating through the grapevine are far more dangerous. That one's smart, like scary smart. Don't play with them. And here's the hilarious twist. Half of these people used to think you were naive, gullible, or just quiet. Turns out you weren't silent. You were processing. Now they're just praying you don't start speaking, because when you do, the truth hits harder than karma on espresso. Here's a fact that'll blow your mind. According to neuroscience, highly intuitive people process information faster and more deeply than the average brain, especially when it comes to reading people. And chosen ones? You were born with that inner radar. It's not just IQ. It's soul intelligence backed by spiritual authority. You can't fake it, you can't teach it, and you definitely can't lie to it. So now, the same ones who mocked your silence are terrified of your intellect. They're whispering your name with respect, fear, and regret. Why? Because you didn't just outthink them. You outgrew the game entirely. Stay locked in, because what you're about to hear will reveal why you've become a walking plot twist. And why people who once underestimated you are now saying, don't mess with that one, that's a different kind of intelligent. Let's go number one. Your intelligence is terrifying because it was never taught. It was remembered. They can't wrap their heads around it. You didn't go to their schools. You weren't mentored by their experts. You didn't read all the right books or quote the usual philosophers, and yet you just know things that take people years to figure out. You grasp in seconds, not because you were taught, but because your soul remembered. This isn't ordinary intelligence. This is ancient encoded wisdom living inside you. That's what has them whispering behind closed doors. Because when you speak, it doesn't sound like something you just learned. It sounds like something that's always been true. People can feel it. You don't parrot information. You channel insight. Your words land heavy. They hit nerve endings and shake foundations. It's not about having the highest grades or the flashiest vocabulary. It's about how you tap into a knowing that runs deeper than logic, deeper than proof. And the scary part for others? They can't trace it. They can't explain how you knew what you knew, or how you predicted that situation, or how you sensed the lie before it even left their mouth. That's why you've become the new topic. They're calling you too smart, but not in a flattering way. What they're really saying is, you make us uncomfortable because you can't be fooled. And it's true. You didn't learn intelligence from systems. You were born with it in spite of them. You were mocked for being different, overlooked for being too quiet, underestimated for not following the herd. But now, those same people are starting to realize you weren't behind. You were ahead. You figured out what others are still struggling to grasp. And it's not just information. It's how you see through things. You don't just analyze situations, you discern spirits. That's not school taught, that's God-given. And no one can take credit for it or replicate it. That's what has them buzzing, that's what keeps them watching. They know you're not the one to play games with. Because while they were trying to impress the world with noise, you were tuning into something far older, far wiser, and far more powerful. You don't just carry intelligence, you carry divine memory, and that changes everything. Number two, you outsmart manipulation without trying. That's why they're cautious now. You've reached a point where people can't play you the way they used to. The tricks don't land, the fake smiles don't fool you. The passive-aggressive comments, the gaslighting, the emotional guilt traps, none of it works anymore. You've outgrown manipulation without even announcing it. And what's throwing everyone off is that you don't even need to call it out. You just see it, process it, and move accordingly. That level of mental strength, it makes people nervous. You've become someone they can't easily push, bait, or deceive. They thought they were dealing with the old version of you, the one that second-guessed everything and gave people the benefit of the doubt, even when your gut was screaming. But now you've flipped the script. Now you read between the lines, study the tone, feel the energy behind their words. You catch contradictions mid-conversation, and even when you stay quiet, your eyes say, I know what you're doing. That silent knowing unsettles people more than a full confrontation ever could. This is why the gossip has changed. It's no longer, oh, they're so sensitive or they don't say much. Now it's, don't mess with them. They'll see right through you. And they're right. You've developed a kind of intelligence that isn't about being the loudest or the most academically decorated. It's about discernment. Street smarts mixed with spiritual insight. And when someone tries to manipulate you, they get hit with both at once. And it leaves them speechless. The reason they're cautious now is because your reactions are calculated. You no longer give people the chaos they want. You respond instead of react. And that scares those who feed off control. Manipulators thrive on confusion, drama, and emotional impulsiveness. But you give them clarity, detachment, and logic, and it throws their whole game off. That's why they talk. That's why your name comes up in whispers and warnings. You've become a mental fortress they can't infiltrate. You didn't announce your evolution, you embodied it. And now the very people who once played mind games with you are telling others to tread carefully. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're not to be underestimated. You don't fall for nonsense, and that makes you dangerous in the best way. Number 3, you're 5 steps ahead, but you don't brag. That's what haunts them. You don't need to announce that you're 5 steps ahead. Your actions do it for you. And what really leaves people unsettled is how calm you are about it. You're not out here trying to prove anything or flex how smart you are. You're just moving quietly, intentionally, and with a confidence that makes people nervous. They thought you were slow to react. They thought you were clueless. But what they didn't realize is that you were already 10 moves into the future, watching them trap themselves, while you stayed 3 decisions ahead of the setup. You didn't get this way by accident. Life trained you. The betrayals, the gaslighting, the fake love, all of it sharpened your mental reflexes. You had to learn how to observe, how to analyze patterns, how to predict behavior before it happened. So now you don't just react to what people say, you study why they're saying it, when and what they're trying to get out of you. That kind of mental clarity is rare, it's intimidating, and it's why they talk behind your back but never to your face. People used to think you were naive because you didn't clap back or argue right away. What they missed is that you were calculating, you were seeing the full board. While they were obsessing over the moment, you were studying the pattern. You knew what they were going to do next, and you quietly positioned yourself in a way that, when it all fell apart, you'd be untouched. That's not luck. That's high-level awareness. And that's why people gossip differently about you now. You're not seen as soft. You're seen as strategic. The truth is, you've embarrassed a lot of people without even trying. You've shown them that being loud isn't power. Being loud is what insecure people do to cover how little they know. You stay quiet because you already understand the game. And that realization eats them up. They're finally realizing you weren't lost. You were focused. You weren't quiet because you were clueless. You were choosing which battles to ignore. And now that the results are showing, people are telling others, be careful with that one. They're not loud, but they're smart as hell. And they move like they've already seen how it ends. Number 4. You never needed degrees to decode deception. You never needed a degree to know when something wasn't right. You didn't need anyone to teach you how to spot a lie, read a room, or feel the energy shift when someone walked in with bad intentions. That's something you've carried since birth. A kind of raw, unpolished intelligence that isn't based on textbooks or diplomas, but on truth, awareness, and spiritual alignment. People don't understand how you're able to pick up on things they miss, even with all their so-called education and status. That's what makes them uncomfortable. They were trained to believe that intelligence looks a certain way. They expected it to show up in someone wearing a suit, using big words, holding a title. But then you showed up, with no need to perform, no need to prove. You just see things. You feel when someone's smiling but hiding a knife. You sense when the words sound sweet but the energy is sour. You notice the patterns, the pauses, the tiny shifts in body language that expose more than 1,000 words ever could. That is a gift. And it didn't come from a university. It came from divine download. You're the type of person who can sit in a room full of people and know exactly who's lying, who's pretending, who's envious, and who's broken. You don't need them to say much. Their spirit speaks louder than their words. That kind of perception scares people who depend on image, because with you their masks slip. Their performance doesn't land, and when they realize you see right through them, their whole game falls apart. It's not that you're trying to expose people, you're just built to recognize truth. It's who you are. And now they're realizing that some of the most powerful minds don't walk around in polished packages. Sometimes they walk in humility, in silence, in someone who wasn't supposed to make it. And yet here you are, reading situations better than the experts, understanding human nature better than trained psychologists, and moving in ways that leave people speechless. You're living proof that God does not need a classroom to activate a calling. You were never trained, you were chosen. And your intelligence, it's not for display, it's for divine disruption. Number 5, you expose systems simply by existing. You do not even have to speak for things to shift. Your presence alone sends a message. The way you carry yourself, the way you think, the way you refuse to play by fake rules, it all exposes the systems around you. You walk into rooms that were built on lies, on control, on silence, and your energy starts shaking things at the foundation. Not because you're loud, not because you're aggressive, but because your mind is free. And that kind of freedom is dangerous in a world built on control. People do not always know how to describe it, but they feel it. You make people nervous who have spent years protecting a lie, whether it is a toxic family dynamic where certain people are allowed to abuse others without consequence, or a religious space where people hide behind titles and traditions. Your very presence becomes a spotlight. It makes people uncomfortable because it forces them to see what they have been pretending not to see. You do not follow the script, and that is the problem. You do not laugh at things that are not funny. You do not play along just to keep the peace. You question things. You challenge patterns. You call things out with your silence, your boundaries, your refusal to pretend. That threatens people who are only powerful inside of broken systems. Because when you show up, the cracks start to show too. You make people realize that the rules they live by are not real. You expose favoritism, manipulation, and false authority just by choosing to live in truth. You do not have to argue. You do not have to fight. You simply live differently, and that is enough to expose everything fake around you. You being authentic makes their performance look obvious. You being honest makes their dishonesty uncomfortable. You being real makes their lies unravel, and that is why they talk. That is why they try to discredit you, ignore you, or twist the story. Because deep down, they know that your presence is revealing everything they have tried to hide. You do not fit into their system because you were never created to. You were built to confront it, shake it, and break it, just by being exactly who you are. Number 6, you know when to appear slow, just to observe who's pretending to be smart. You have always known how to play the long game. You learned early on that not every room deserves your full display of intelligence. Sometimes it is smarter to hold back, to stay quiet, to let others reveal themselves. While they were performing, trying to sound deep, trying to impress, you were sitting still and collecting data. You watched how they moved. You listened to what they said, and more importantly, what they did not say. You let them underestimate you on purpose, because you knew that real power does not need to prove itself right away. They assumed your silence meant confusion. They thought you were slow, maybe even clueless, but what they did not realize is that you were just not invested in their ego games. You were 2 layers deeper, analyzing patterns, reading body language, catching inconsistencies. You were learning who was pretending, who was insecure, who needed validation. And you were doing it all without saying a word. Now the tables have turned. The ones who once talked over you are realizing they were talking in circles. The ones who used to throw around big words and complicated ideas are starting to look exposed. Because when the situation called for real clarity, real direction, real discernment, it was you who had the answers. Not the loud ones, not the flashy ones, you. The one they thought was slow. It is not that you are quiet because you are shy. You are quiet because you are strategic. You are aware that people often show you more when they think you are not a threat. So you let them talk, you let them perform, you let them believe they were the smartest person in the room, and in that belief they expose their flaws, their pride, their lack of substance. You do not rush to correct people. You do not jump into every debate, because your goal has never been to win arguments. Your goal has always been to understand the truth. That is a different kind of intelligence, one that does not need applause, one that is rooted in patience, self-control, and deep observation. Now they know. You were never slow, you were studying, And now that you have seen what you needed to see, they are the ones feeling exposed. Not because you attacked them, but because they finally realized you were never fooled, not for a second. Number 7, your clarity doesn't come from logic alone. It comes from spiritual alignment. There's a difference between thinking clearly and seeing clearly. Most people rely only on logic. They gather facts, they analyze data, they build conclusions based on what is visible. But you operate on a completely different frequency. Your clarity does not just come from what you know in your mind. It comes from what you are aligned with in your spirit. That is why people do not understand how you are able to speak on things before they even unfold. You are not guessing. You're connected. You have tapped into a level of understanding that cannot be taught in any classroom. It is not just knowledge, it is revelation. You receive insights from a place that does not use words, formulas, or statistics. It comes in waves, in inner knowings, in strong feelings that cannot be ignored. Some people call it intuition. Some call it discernment. But you know it goes beyond both. It is spiritual alignment. And once you started walking in that alignment, everything began to shift. You feel truth. You do not need a full explanation to know when something is off. You sense it in the energy, in the timing, in the silence between people's words. That is what makes you so rare and so misunderstood. People who depend on facts alone try to debate you, thinking they can corner you with their logic. But they do not realize you are not arguing from intellect. You are speaking from a place of divine clarity. That kind of knowing cannot be out-argued. It does not stutter. It does not bend. It just is. You are not always able to explain why you know what you know, but when time passes and the truth comes out, people always circle back saying, "How did you see that coming?" What they do not know is that your mind is not your only tool. Your spirit is tuned in, your soul is aligned. And that is why your insight goes deeper than conversations, deeper than opinions, deeper than surface-level facts. You do not chase truth, you attract it, because you walk in it. And when you speak, something shifts in the atmosphere. Not because you are trying to sound smart, but because your words are rooted in something greater than logic. They are rooted in alignment. Number 8, they're gossiping because you made their smartest person look foolish. There is always someone in every group, every circle, every family, or every workplace who is seen as the smartest. The one who talks the most. The one people do not question. The one who always has an answer, even if it is wrong. They are usually praised, protected, and put on a pedestal. People are used to clapping for them without ever really thinking about what they are saying. They have become comfortable because no one ever holds them accountable until you show up. You did not try to embarrass anyone. You were not trying to compete. But the moment that person tried to test you, to challenge you, or to speak over you, everything shifted. You did not raise your voice. You did not use fancy words. You simply spoke from a place of truth, clarity, and confidence. And in that moment, the mask fell off. Everyone saw it. They saw the cracks. They saw how much that smartest person relied on performance instead of substance. And the room got quiet. Now the gossip is not about what you said. It is about how you said it. Calm, focused, unbothered. You did not have to argue, you just revealed. That is what sets you apart. Your intelligence is not based on proving people wrong. It is based on showing people what they missed. And that type of presence threatens those who have been comfortable hiding behind big titles, loud voices, or fake confidence. People are now talking, not because you were disrespectful, but because you disrupted a false structure. You showed that the one they thought was untouchable could actually be challenged, and not with arrogance, but with wisdom. You held up a mirror to their favorite genius, and it reflected things nobody wanted to admit. That is why your name is spreading. That is why whispers have turned into warnings. You are not the loudest. You are not trying to shine, but your mind is sharp, your spirit is anchored, and your words carry weight. And now everyone knows that if you are quiet in a room, it is not because you are lost, it is because you are studying. And if you choose to speak, the truth is going to hit, and something or someone is going to be exposed. Number 9, you're not a know-it-all, you're a feel-it-all. You are not the type to walk into a room and try to dominate the conversation. You are not loud. You are not forceful. You do not interrupt just to prove a point. In fact, some people mistake you for quiet or passive, but what they do not realize is that you are not processing with just your brain. You are processing with your entire being. You are not here to show off what you know. You are here to feel what is true. Your intelligence is not rooted in ego. It is not about collecting information just to sound smart. You absorb what others miss because you sense what they cannot feel. You do not just hear words, you hear tone, energy, intention, and vibration. You pick up on what people try to hide between the lines. You understand pain that has never been spoken out loud. That is not something you learn in a classroom. That is something you are wired with. When you speak, it hits differently, not because you are louder, not because you have more data, but because your words carry the weight of spiritual insight. You feel the atmosphere. You feel the heartbreak behind the smile. You feel the tension hiding in small talk. That is what sets you apart. You do not just respond to what is obvious, you respond to what is real, even if no one else sees it yet. People feel exposed when they talk to you, not because you are judgmental, but because you are present. You see them, you feel them, and you mirror back truths they have been avoiding. That is why some people back away from you. It is not that you are wrong, it is that you are too right, and they were not ready to face it. Your intelligence is soaked in empathy. It is mixed with intuition. It is sharpened by discernment. That is a rare combination. You are not a know-it-all. You do not walk around correcting people for attention. You sit back, observe, and when you speak, it carries weight because it is backed by something real, something spiritual, something timeless. You are not just thinking, you are feeling, and that level of depth makes you impossible to manipulate, difficult to lie to, and unforgettable to those who cross your path. Number 10. You break mental traps in people without saying a word. You do not have to raise your voice to change someone's life. You do not need a stage, a spotlight, or a long speech to create impact. Sometimes all it takes is one question, one look, one pause, and suddenly everything a person thought they knew begins to shake. That is the kind of presence you carry. It is not forceful, but it is powerful. It is not loud, but it is undeniable. You do not just talk, you disarm. And that is why people remember you long after the conversation ends. You have a way of getting into people's heads without even trying, not to manipulate, but to awaken. You see the loops they are stuck in, the mental cages they have built for themselves, the beliefs they cling to that are not even theirs. And you know how to cut through all of it, not by lecturing, but by reflecting. Sometimes it is a short sentence, sometimes it is just a quiet, steady gaze that makes a person hear their own thoughts more clearly than ever before. You have caused people to question lies they have lived by for years, and you did it without shouting, without preaching, without attacking. That is why your presence is so unsettling to those who are not ready to be real with themselves, because being around you forces them to feel, to think, to confront what they have been running from. And not everyone is ready for that kind of shift. You have likely had people thank you for helping them see something they were blind to, even when you were not trying to help. All you did was speak your truth, ask a direct question, or simply not react the way they expected. And in that space, something broke. A belief, a defense, a delusion. You do not fix people. You unhook them. You give them the space and the clarity to face themselves. And that is why people gossip. That is why your name carries weight in rooms you have never walked into. Not because you are rude or harsh, but because you are effective. You unlock minds. You disturb illusions. You break cycles. And all without saying more than what is needed. That kind of influence cannot be taught. It can only be carried. And you carry it well. Number 11, you can decode a lie mid-sentence without interrupting the speaker. You do not need to hear the whole sentence to know someone is lying. Your mind catches it almost instantly. It is not just what they are saying, it is how they are saying it. The slight change in tone, the hesitation before a word, the forced laugh, the shift in their eyes, the fake calm in their voice. You pick it up in real time. You do not need to pause the conversation or make a scene. You just file the information and keep listening, even though you already know the truth. You have trained yourself, whether consciously or not, to read people beyond their words. You have become so aware, so in tune, that deception has a frequency, and you feel it before the words are even finished. That is why people feel nervous when they try to lie to you. Even if you do not say anything, they can feel it. Your silence is not blank. It is active. You are watching, you are calculating, and you are catching every inconsistency. And the part that really throws people off is how calm you remain. You do not call them out right away. You do not confront them with emotion. You let them talk. You let them believe they got away with it. But inside, you already know what part of the story was fake, what detail was added for show, what feeling they tried to fake. You read people like a blueprint. You track lies like patterns. You catch the performance in the middle of the act, and they have no idea you are watching the entire script fall apart. This is why your name travels. People who have lied to you in the past end up warning others. They say things like, "Be careful what you say around them," or "They'll know if you're not being real." It is not because you are aggressive, it is because you are too accurate. You spot deception without being told. You feel the shift in the room when something fake enters the conversation, and once you feel it, you never forget it. Your intelligence is not just analytical, it is spiritual. You are tuned in. And that kind of awareness cannot be fooled, bought, or explained away. You do not need proof to know the truth. You just know. And that makes people think twice before they speak. Number 12. You're making people realize that intelligence without integrity is just manipulation. You are showing people something they were never taught to question, that intelligence by itself is not impressive if it lacks integrity. For a long time they admired people who spoke well, argued well, and always had a clever response. They thought sharp minds equaled strong leadership, deep wisdom, or moral authority. But then you came along, quiet, discerning, thoughtful. You did not just speak, you meant every word. You did not just know a lot, you lived it. And that contrast began to open people's eyes. You exposed what many were too afraid to see, that some of the smartest people in the room were actually the most dangerous, not because they were loud, but because they used their intelligence as a weapon. They knew how to manipulate, gaslight, twist facts, and stay 2 steps ahead, not to help, but to control. They were admired for their brains, even while their hearts were dark, and no one questioned it because we live in a world that praises intellect, even when it comes at the cost of empathy. But you broke that illusion. You made people uncomfortable in the best way, because when you showed up, you proved that it is possible to be sharp and sincere. You showed that you can be wise without being arrogant, discerning without being cruel, and gifted without being manipulative. That balance shook people. It forced them to realize that many of the people they once respected were not wise. They were just clever and often selfish. And now, those same smart bullies are scared of you. Not because you argue with them, but because your existence reveals what they lack. You are intelligent, but not for control. You are intelligent with purpose. You use your insight to bring clarity, not confusion. To heal, not to harm. To lead, not to dominate. That kind of purity in thought and heart is rare, and in toxic environments it is threatening. You are living proof that real intelligence does not manipulate, it liberates. And that truth is starting to wake people up. The ones who were fooled by fancy words are now watching how you move. And they are beginning to understand the difference between being smart and being whole. Number 13, your mind is so sharp it's now a warning label. Your name no longer floats around like casual gossip. It echoes like a warning. People speak on you with a mix of fear, confusion, and quiet respect. Not because you threatened anyone, but because you've built a reputation for being the one person who does not fall for anything. You have caught lies mid-air. You have exposed manipulations without raising your voice. You have walked away from setups before the trap even closed. And every time you did, people were left stunned, some embarrassed, others humiliated, and all of them more cautious than before. They used to try you, they used to test you. They thought they could out-talk you, outthink you, or pull you into their schemes. But time after time, you saw right through it. You played along just long enough to study their moves, and when the moment was right, you made one decision that left the entire situation exposed. Now those same people are telling others to be careful around you. They are not warning people because you are dangerous in a violent way. They are warning people because your mind is too sharp, too fast, too precise. You do not miss much, and you never forget what you see. Your presence alone now shifts the atmosphere. People know that if they are not being honest, they are not safe around you. If they are hiding something, it will not stay hidden for long. If they are trying to manipulate, they better have a backup plan, because your awareness is not average. You do not just see what is in front of you, you see behind it. You see the motive, the pattern, the setup, the game, and you make people realize that pretending around you is a waste of time. That is why the gossip has changed. It is no longer mocking, it is not dismissive, it is careful. They say things like, "Watch what you say around them," or "They are not the one to play with," and they mean it. You are not viewed as a soft target anymore. You are seen as a spiritual sniper, silent, focused, and not to be messed with. Your mind became a mirror, and too many people saw themselves clearly for the first time. That is why they talk, not out of hate, but out of fear wrapped in respect. Number 14. You're not just smart. You're dangerous to the agenda. You never signed up for war, but you became a threat the moment you woke up. The fear surrounding you doesn't come from your intelligence alone. It comes from the fact that you can no longer be controlled. That's what makes you dangerous to every false system, every manipulative circle, every agenda built on illusion. You don't just ask questions, you dismantle lies. You don't just think critically, you see spiritually. That's a problem in a world where most people are rewarded for going along with whatever sounds popular or safe. The truth is, they're not worried about your opinions. They're worried about your sight. You don't fall for emotional bait, political theater, religious guilt traps, or fake activism masked as righteousness. You decode what's not being said. You see who's benefiting, who's being silenced, and who's pulling the strings. You've become the glitch in every manipulation matrix. That's why people whisper. That's why they avoid certain conversations around you. That's why some even pretend to like you, while secretly panicking behind closed doors. Your discernment exposes both enemies and enablers. You call out systems that many have blindly served for years. You point out toxic family loyalty that's disguised as honor. You challenge spiritual leaders who built platforms on half-truths and ego. You are the person who disrupts generational delusion without needing a crowd to back you up. You walk alone, but your presence carries the weight of someone who's backed by truth itself. And the most terrifying part, you have proof. You're not just passionate, you're precise. You're not just vocal, you're informed. You don't just see the game, you know who wrote the rules. You move like someone who read the blueprint and decided to flip the table. And because of that, they know they can't recruit you. They can't guilt you. They can't distract you with fame, followers, or flattery. You're immune to the usual manipulation tactics. And that immunity makes you uncontrollable. You're not just intelligent, you are aligned. You're not just informed, you are awake. And in a world built on illusions, there is nothing more dangerous than someone who refuses to go back to sleep. They thought you were just smart. They didn't realize you were activated. There's a difference between someone who reads books and someone who reads energy, motives, and patterns that others can't even name. What scares them isn't your vocabulary, it's your vision. You don't just outthink people, you outsee them. You don't just break down arguments. You break down entire agendas, quietly, accurately, permanently. Your intelligence didn't come from privilege, titles, or approval. It came from spiritual warfare, betrayal, silence, and the kind of isolation that forced you to hear God clearly. And now that you've sharpened your mind, trained your discernment, and mastered your emotional awareness, you're not just a problem, you're a revelation. That's why your name is spreading. That's why they talk when you leave the room. That's why some admire you, others envy you, but all of them respect the power you carry. You're not the type to flex it, but it speaks anyway, loudly, without trying, because your presence itself is the proof. So let them gossip, let them warn each other, let them pretend they don't see what's happening. Meanwhile, you keep walking in truth, wisdom, and divine alignment, because you're not just highly intelligent, you're highly anointed. And that kind of brilliance, it can't be taught, bought, or faked. It's heaven certified. If this message hit your spirit, don't scroll away, take action. Here's how you can support the movement and stay plugged in. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss another powerful download. This space is built for you. Like the video if it lit something inside you or confirmed what you've always known. Comment below and let the world know you're one of the awakened ones. Your voice matters here. Share this video with someone else who walks with quiet power and divine insight. They need to hear this. This isn't just content, it's confirmation. Welcome to the frequency where chosen ones rise and illusions fall. Let's keep shaking the system together. God bless you.